Welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I'm thrilled to have Peter Bukowski on the show. He is the host of Locked On Packers, the podcast. He also hosts Locked On Sports Today, and he has a Substack called The Leap. Peter, welcome to the show.
It's good to be back. Good to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting Newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you, even outside my specialty area of football. Even in June and July, we will be cranking through bets in 5 Nugget Saturday. It's my curated list of tips and analytics. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. Peter, I'm so excited to talk to you about the Packers. I really feel like they're one of the most fascinating teams going into the 2024 season. And, last year, I feel like there were two different seasons for this offense. Jordan Love started the season as the starter. It was his first year as a starter and wasn't so good through the first part of the season. I looked at his numbers later and the offensive numbers later, and they were remarkably better. I actually separated out, the first part of the season and the latter part of the season. And the Packers' pass offense, by my most trusted metric, which is adjusted passing success rate, they were only second behind the Niners. Yeah. So give me your take on, what happened. Go back as far as we need to go with Jordan Love, Matt Lafleur. What happened with the season, and did you see that coming?
What's so funny is, the first half I saw coming in that you've got the youngest group of pass catchers in modern NFL history. Like that is not hyperbole. That is an empirical fact. Just in terms of first and second year players, they did not have someone old enough to rent a car on this offense other than Aaron Jones. So that's how young this team was. They lost David Bakhtiari in the first game. He played 55 total snaps, and this is an offense that still ultimately ends up fifth in EPA per play at the end of the season. That part, to me, I could not have predicted. I could not have predicted that they would be a top 5 offense, a top 10 offense by some other metrics that you might like more. Given the way that the season started, even with that, I thought that was the most likely version of this team, that there would be some highs, some variance, like the version that we saw in the first 3 games. They blow out the Bears, but that was a close game until the second half, really. They come back to beat the Saints, but they're down 17-0 in that game. And then they have a double-digit lead against the Falcons, and in the fourth quarter, the defense can't close the deal. The offense bogged down a little bit. Like, that's kind of the version of the team I thought we would get all year. I didn't expect during the 5-game losing streak they would look as bad as they did. Jordan Love throws 3 interceptions against the Raiders. He throws 2 interceptions against the Lions. He had 12 on the season, but threw 5 in just those 2 games. I think he had 6 in that part of that losing streak. Right. And so to see them in the second half explode the way that they did, it made sense from just get the rookies and the quarterback on the same page standpoint. But to be that good, to be by Pro Football Focus grading and EPA per play and some of these other numbers, like the most productive, most efficient quarterback in the league, because that's what he was in the second half. That is not something I would have anticipated in year 1 with this cast around him. That was something that I thought, okay, year 2, year 3, he could be that. He has that sort of talent Jordan Love does. And then the other part of this, Ed, that I think is really important and we can't overlook is Matt Lafleur is a hell of a coach. In every year so far that he has been the head coach in Green Bay, the Packers have been top 5 in what Next Gen calls open percentage for wide receivers and wide open percentage when it comes to receivers. He is as good as anyone in the league at scheming guys open. And it took Jordan Love a little while to get some of the downfield throws that were available to him in the second half of the season. He was one of the best deep ball throwers in the league. And it was going to take some time, was always going to take some time, but I did not see it coalescing this quickly, especially for a group this young.
Yeah, that's fascinating. If you had to distribute the pie of credit, how do you distribute it amongst Lafleur, Love, and then his young receiving core?
I think you have to take the two biggest chunks have to go to Love and Lafleur. And that's weird to say because at the same time, I think the biggest difference in the second half was not Jordan Love. I think it was the chemistry that he found with these receivers. And so it's like the receivers getting on the same page with the quarterback. Like there were multiple times that, and this happened in the playoff game even, they had a run pass option that they call probably a dozen times a game where it's either an inside zone give or it is a receiver screen. And at least twice, if not three times this season, the receiver that was supposed to run the screen forgot to run the screen. They just blocked. Okay. And it's like, you can't run an RPO where there's no P. Like then you're running a run option. And if Jordan Love keeps the ball, he's got no one to throw the ball to. Luckily against the 49ers, he ran and I if my memory serves, and picked up a couple yards. But it's just like, that's the kind of thing we were talking about. It was the details where, Christian Watson on a core concept is supposed to outside release, and he doesn't. And because he doesn't, he's not able to widen the linebacker, and that closes down the window that Jordan Love expects to be there. And so it turns into a turnover. Those are the kinds of things that were keeping this offense from getting where they needed to get to. The highs were still there. The great throws were still there. The fourth quarter against the Saints, like that's as good a quarter of football as any quarterback in the league played last year. That was week 2. But then in the middle of the season, I think Love lost some confidence. I think Lafleur lost some confidence in his offense, didn't know what he could call. You lose Aaron Jones. For most of the season, Aaron Jones only played, I think, 30% of snaps last year. And so it was really just a comedy of errors in the middle of the season. And then it just started it just clicked a little bit. And yes, Jordan Love played better. Matt Lafleur called a better game, but we've seen Matt Lafleur be good before. It was really the receivers locking into place that changed everything. And I think in a lot of ways, it was Christian Watson's return. That's when the offense changed, because you look at that Lions game on Thanksgiving, first play of the game, play action shot, monster play. They go down and score. He has the slot fade touchdown to ultimately seal that game. And the next week against the Chiefs, he scores on one of the most ridiculous throws of the year for Jordan Love, high and outside in the red zone, perfect coverage. Love darts him up. He makes a leaping grab for a touchdown. He had the first touchdown of the game as well. That's what Christian Watson has done in his career when he's been healthy. And it was sort of like, okay, this is what this offense can be. This is what they can do. They just beat 2 of the best teams in the league, 2 of the final 4 teams at the end of the season. We didn't know that at the time, of course. That's when everything changed for everyone. So yeah, Lafleur and Love get the biggest piece of the pie, but it took everyone getting on the same page for this offense to get to where it wanted to go. And now it's just sort of like, what is the ceiling of this? Where can they get to? And I said on Locked On Packers, I think this can be the best offense in the league if they stay healthy.
So can they stay healthy? Christian Watson doesn't have a really good track record of that.
Well, the good news, if you're not following the Packers like super closely, which I totally understand, is Christian Watson and Eric Stokes both went to the University of Wisconsin, and they had special tests and imaging done. And what they found with Christian Watson is he had an asymmetry in the strength of his legs. Based on a previous injury, one of his legs was about 20% weaker than his other. And that was causing compensation problems. And then ultimately that led to the hamstring injuries that plagued him the last 2 years. He said that's down to 10%. And he'd like to be less. He'd like to be in that sort of 6 to 8% if he can get there. That's well within the normal range. Anything less than 10 is a good number. And so he's hoping he didn't have an injury problem like this in college. But then had the injury, ended up getting a knee scope. And I think that was the remnants of something they wanted to get cleaned up. They didn't, when they went in for the scope, know that he had this asymmetry. Otherwise, of course, they would have worked a little harder to try and fix that, I'm sure. But he seems to be feeling good about where he is. And I think year 2 for these young players, now they know what it is. You put on a little extra weight in the offseason. You go through a full offseason training program. You and I both know as you get older, it's easier to keep weight on, even if you don't want to keep weight on. And so that's just part of growing up in life. And so they've come back, and like even Bo Melton is someone who you might have think I just made that name up, but he was someone that came on late for the Packers, was the first receiver on this team to have 100 yards, and it didn't happen until the Vikings, and I think that was week 14. That's how egalitarian this offense is. And so this is going to be really fun to see how this all shakes out. The good news is they weren't healthy last year and were a top 5 offense. And so even if they don't have health, they can be really, really good. If they are healthy, look out.
Excellent. All right, Peter, I want to go to the defensive side of the ball. And I actually think the defensive hire in Jeff Hafley is really interesting. 2019, he's the co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State, and this unit was ridiculously good. First in basically everything that I could possibly find. And it's been an interesting defense because of what happened to both Hafley and then a bunch of his players. So he takes the head coaching job at Boston College, doesn't really have a great tenure there, never wins more than 7 games. And none of his defenses were particularly good. And then also I think the players on that 2019 Ohio State defense never really became what they should have been in the NFL. Guys like Chase Young, 2nd overall pick, not exactly fulfilling that type of draft capital, right? Jeffrey Okudah, the 3rd overall pick, kind of a flame out, but he's doing better than Damon Arnett, the 19th pick at cornerback, who hasn't even played. So it's this, we numbers people always say defense is volatile. I think Hafley obviously had a great defense in 2019 at Ohio State, hasn't really shown it since. So maybe take us through Lafleur's decision to hire him and what you think about the defense side of the ball.
So I knew next to nothing about Jeff Hafley when he was hired in Green Bay. And that rarely happens. Like, I am pretty deep in all of this. I'm lucky enough to have some people that I trust that allow me to have some insight on some of this stuff. And my co-founder at The Leap, Jason Hirschhorn, is a pro when it comes to tracking the coaching hiring, the guys who are the likely candidates. Like, he's just really good at this. And so that was, first of all, that was shocking. That I just like had no inkling that this was happening. But then the more I learned about Jeff Hafley and the more I went back and studied his history and watched some of the press conferences, and I was so taken by him as a communicator, I actually changed the structure of my podcast for multiple episodes to put together narrative podcasts to just let Jeff Hafley cook. Just let Jeff Hafley talk about Jeff Hafley. Because he had done a couple interviews and some of his press conference stuff. I was just like, he is so adept at communicating what he means. And then you hear people like Richard Sherman talk about him, Jordan Fuller talk about him. And like, his nickname at Ohio State was the Wizard, because they just felt like he could manipulate things in ways that other coaches just couldn't. And while his Boston College teams were not very good, you know what they were? Aggressive as hell. They blitzed as much as any team in the league on 3rd down, on 4th down, and in the red zone. They played man coverage as much as any team in college football because they had to, because they were just like, we got to blitz and play man because it's the only chance we have defensively, because we just don't have the horses to stick with these guys. And that's not the Saleh Ryan's MO. That's where he comes from. He was with Kyle Shanahan in Cleveland when Tayshaun Gibson had his breakout season. He's a DB coach by trade. And I've been trying to talk to some people who know defense, better than I do, follow the trends closer than I can, just because it's all they do. And no one really has a handle on exactly what this defense is going to look like. The closest thing I can come up with is it will be similar on early downs to some of the jet stuff that we've seen, but with more single high safety. It's going to be a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 1. And then on 3rd down, much like those Rams teams with Brandon Staley, and this has always been a 49ers thing as well, they're just going to come in and try and attack and penetrate on early downs. And then on 3rd down, they're going to tune you up. They're going to send extras. They're going to have exotics. They're going to have you in a torture chamber for 60 minutes because all they're going to do is attack. And that was the big word that Rashawn Gary the other day at minicamp was just sort of like, tell us about Jeff Hafley. And he was like, attack. That's what Jeff Hafley wants. And so there's going to be some remnants of that cover 3 Seahawks stuff that Robert Saleh was playing. I think there's going to be, he wants to play true post safety. That's what Xavier McKinney is going to be. But they have to be able to disguise pre and post snap. There's going to be a lot of pre-snap movement, a lot of post-snap safety rotations. You're going to see exotic blitzes. And what was so cool about the vision-based defense that they played at Ohio State is if you watch them, their idea was, we want everyone to be able to play everywhere. So that if we need a safety that's in a too high to come down and play the slot because we want to disguise a coverage, then he's got to be able to do that. If we want to spin and have a corner come out and play deep half, he's got to know responsibilities for that. They're gonna show a ton at offenses, and I think in the modern NFL, you have to be able to show so many looks at opposing offenses because these coaches are too smart, the quarterbacks are too adept, the coaching and the schemes are too good for you to just like sit back and play cover 3 or sit back and play cover 4. It's not that world anymore. And so I think you're going to see much more aggressive Packers defense. The players absolutely love the defense right now. And so it's going to be an adjustment period for everyone early on, but that includes opposing offenses who are just not going to know what's coming for the first month.
Right. I presume it will also help to have a couple of healthy cornerbacks, your starters, and Jair Alexander and Eric Stokes, who you talked about earlier.
And Jair Alexander is locked in. In fact, was at OTAs for the first time since 2020, I think, to the point that the Packers actually gave him mini camp off because they were just like, you've been here. We appreciate you being here. You've hit your bonuses. They gave Xavier McKinney, their new free agent safety, off. Keyshawn Nixon, who's a veteran slot corner. They gave him mini camp off. And I think part of that is aimed at protecting these guys. Eric Stokes, according to Matt Lafleur, looks as healthy and as athletic as he's ever looked. Carrington Valentine, who played well in the second half of last season, as a 7th round rookie, he's added some strength, which is, he was really skinny last year, but he's a guy that wants to play physically. So, okay, we're going to play more press man coverage. Then Carrington, you got to put some strength on. You got to get in the weight room, and he embraced that challenge and did. Came back bigger, stronger. So they have more depth at corner, and then Kalen King is a corner that they got in the 7th round this year who quietly, I think, has a chance to carve out a role here because he was someone who, if you go back to preseason mocks in 2022, he was before the 2022 season. What year is it? I think he was being projected as a 1st round corner in the 2023 draft. And then he came back and did not have a good 2023, lost a little bit of confidence, then did not test well, did not play well at the Senior Bowl. But you go back and you watch the 2022 tape. I mean, he looks like a top 50 player. And so it's like, okay, can you recapture some of that? And in a place like Green Bay, where he doesn't have to play right away, where you've got a defensive backs coach who is your defensive coordinator. Jeff Hafley made his money in the NFL as a DB's coach, developing guys like Emmanuel Mosley and Richard Sherman. Credits a lot of his late career development to Jeff Hafley and some of the transitions that he had to make schematically. So that part of it, the ability to find late players and turn them into meaningful players, is how a team that is going to get expensive soon because Jordan Love is about to get paid. It's how they can maintain a standard of excellence.
Excellent. So I want to ask you about the Detroit Lions. They had a great season last year, almost made the Super Bowl. A lot of the most important pieces on the offense are back. And finally, after forever, they are trying to make some upgrades in the secondary, which has been a huge weakness on the team.
For sure.
So from your Green Bay viewpoint, what do you see with these Detroit Lions heading into the season?
Well, I think they were really bad in the second half of the year defensively. Like that, there's no way around that. And I know that they were a couple bounces away from the Super Bowl. So were the Packers. I think stability on defense, as you know, is something that is pretty volatile. And so I understand them saying, look, we actually need to want to have some defensive backs who can take the ball away. They come in and they snipe Terrion Arnold from the Packers, who I think is probably who the Packers would have taken if he'd have been there in the first round. And so I like some of those moves, but I have a saying, Ed, on Twitter and on Locked On Packers, And that saying is most rookies are bad. And even players who turn out to be good are generally bad as rookies. And that is especially true at corner. If you are relying on rookie corners, unless they are Sauce Gardner, you are probably going to have a bad passing defense. And the problem for Detroit is, yes, they've made some upgrades in the secondary. They still don't have anybody except Aiden Hutchinson to rush the passer. And that was a big problem in the second half of last year, is they had to start blitzing. They want to blitz and play more man coverage. But if you don't have the horses to cover, you can't do that, A. And B, if you have to blitz all the time, it makes it a little bit easier for teams to go, okay, well, if we can stay on schedule, if we can be efficient on early downs, you can't just like pin your ears back on third down and send these exotic pressures and do all that fun stuff, especially on first down. Like, what are you going to do on 1st and 10? Are you going to start run blitzing? Are you going to what is the plan going to be if you can't get pressure with 4? I just don't think that's a sustainable way to live. I think the Chiefs, the biggest difference in the way that the Chiefs look the last few years, and the reason that they're suddenly an elite defense again, is because they drafted George Karlaftis. It's because Chris Jones has elevated his game to another level and is playing like one of the best 3 or 4 defensive players in the whole league. It's because they can get home with 4 that their blitz looks become more effective. And that's the big question for me with Detroit, is they didn't add a secondary pass rusher. There's still time, they could still do that, I suppose. But if you can stay on schedule on early downs, I still think you're going to have a lot of success on this defense. The problem is their run defense last year was really good. So you have to be able to throw on early downs against them. You have to be able to use play action on early downs against them. I don't think their linebacker play is particularly great. They got a lot of praise from the football purist section of NFL media for their drafts the last 2 years. And Jack Campbell was one of the worst linebackers in football last year. I don't know what to tell you. That's just the truth. And so if you're going to attack this team, it's through the air. And at least in year 1, I think you're going to be able to do that. Now in year 2, year 3, when those guys have a little bit more time and seasoning, maybe by the end of the year, they're looking better. But I think early in the year, especially, you're going to be able to get after this secondary a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Lions, hopefully veterans like Carlton Davis come in, and
he's got to stay healthy.
And then they had a guy from the Raiders. I can't remember what his name is, but
Meek Robertson, the guy that sealed the game against the Packers, the game-sealing interception on the throw to Christian Watson, where Christian Watson got open. Love found him a little late because he had to rush. He had to roll to his left, avoid pressure, and then underthrew it. Did not give Christian Watson a chance to go up and get it. So yeah, that's he's got some good vibes playing the Packers.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, his PFF grades look solid. Like kind of an unspectacular league average corner, although that's
a big upgrade. Nate Tice talks about this all the time. Going from bad to fine is the biggest upgrade you can make.
Exactly, and I think particularly at the cornerback position, there's not a ton of guys that can cover in the NFL at that level. So.
Well, and we know it's a weak link system, so you are only as good as your worst player. And so if you have more than one bad player, it's really hard to be a good defense when you've got a couple bad players. If you've got no great players, but also no bad players, you can be a pretty good defense. I don't think the Jets, Robert Saleh is awesome. They have Sauce Gardner, and their linebackers are pretty good. Quinn Williams is pretty good, but they have a lot of just solid players on that defense. And that to me, more than anything, is why they've been so good. Same with the Bills. None of those defenses the last couple of years have had a TJ Watt level player or a Sauce Gardner level corner, even Trey White at his best. But they're just good. They have a bunch of good players, and the Lions just don't.
Right. For the Bills, right? They had the ton of secondary injuries last year, and then you guys shipped over Rasul Douglas.
Yeah, and saved their season.
Really, really helped them, right? And Rasul Douglas is not exceptional, but he's solid.
He's solid and a veteran leader, and it is going to take the ball away. I'll be honest, I hated that trade for the Packers.
Sure.
And I think if you'd have told them in October that they would be in the divisional round of the playoffs in January, they probably would not have made that move.
Right.
But,
absolutely.
They did, and it ended up working out because the offense found its groove. But now they're relying a lot on Eric Stokes, to your earlier point about his health. And that's a pretty big gamble. I really like Eric Stokes. I think that there's a ton of talent there. He's had a really good spring and early summer so far, according to the Packers. We don't get to see them very much. And so we kind of got to take their word for it at this point. But that's a pretty big bet. But because there is a certain baseline level of play, I think that it's a reasonable bet to make.
The Lions are currently the favorite on FanDuel to win the NFC North, but Green Bay is not that far behind. Do the markets have it right there?
Let me say this. I understand why the markets are the way that they are, but I also watch these two teams at the end of the year, and I look at the trajectory of where guys like Jordan Love and Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed are going. I don't see the same sort of thing for the Lions. Is Jared Goff going to get any better than he was the last 2 years in Detroit? I don't see a reasonable case he's going to get significantly better. Is Amon-Ra St. Brown going to catch 140 passes this year? Like, I don't see that. Is Sam Laporta going to be something better than second team All-Pro? It just seems like the players who are like Jahmyr Gibbs could take a little bit of a step forward. Okay, that's nice. But the things that they were good at last year, they were really good at. And the things that they were bad at, I don't know that they fixed. If I'm, and I've said this on Locked on Packers all summer, if I were setting the markets, I would have the Packers as the favorites. I think I have and will pick them to win the division. I think the Lions are right there. And so I think I would probably have them. What does FanDuel have the odds at right now at the top?
I don't remember, but it was close. Right? Like,
yeah, I just had it the other day. I think there is a clear tier at the top, and I'm wondering, before I tell you, and I know we wanted to talk about this, what do you make of the Bears hype? Because I'll be honest, I just don't see it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Bears. I don't really see it either. I mean, you have a rookie quarterback who should be good, but rookie quarterbacks aren't necessarily good. And I think the narrative has been that, he's got the greatest receiving core that a rookie quarterback's ever had. And, if you're comparing him to what Bryce Young had last year, okay, great. Yeah. DJ Moore is obviously incredible. Keenan Allen has been a superstar in this league, although he's old and often injured.
Yeah.
And I love rookie Rome Odunze out of Washington, but there's no guarantee that he can do it.
Most rookies are bad.
Right. Exactly. And, I don't know. Maybe he could be Puka Nacua part 2, but you need to see that. I mean, I think they have some interesting pieces on defense. I mean, I think you can make the argument as the Bears being a pretty high variance team, right? Looking at it right now, they could be great. It could all come together.
I think that's maybe right. And that's probably why the markets have them where they are, because there is certainly an outcome where like Caleb Williams comes in and he's CJ Stroud. And if he is, then yeah, this is a playoff team, right? Like I don't think that's a stretch to say at all. I just found the markets. They have the Lions plus 145, the Packers plus 185. Mm-hmm. I think those are reasonable numbers. I would just flip them.
Right. Okay.
Because then the Bears are plus 320. Like I think that's probably fair. The Vikings at 9-1. I don't think the Vikings are going to win the division. But
okay.
I think 9-1 is crazy.
Interesting.
I just think those are too long. When we saw them win games last year with Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs, like I have a lot of respect for Kevin O'Connell. I have a lot of respect for Brian Flores, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. I know TJ Hawkinson's not going to start the year healthy. You add Aaron Jones. Like I trust the infrastructure there. And whether it's going to be JJ McCarthy starting, and it's probably going to be Sam Darnold, but like I just think the baseline for them is higher than those numbers indicate. And part of that is because I don't think the Lions or the Packers are like some 13 or 14 win juggernaut. Like I think they're 11.
10, 11 wins.
If things break right, a 12-win team. I think the Vikings can be a 7 or an 8-win team, kind of at a minimum, not at a minimum, but like at a reasonable outcome. And that's 2 or 3 games of variance away from just like sneaking into 10 wins. That doesn't seem crazy to me. Like the implied odds of 9-1, I kind of just don't see that.
I have been trying to find a reason to like this Minnesota team for a couple of years. I mean, I dug hard into this because I wasn't necessarily buying the Lions hype last year.
Yeah.
It was like one of those
Commanders
things.
are 10-1 to win the East. Like, explain that.
A
How
rookie
can that be
quarterback,
true?
a rookie quarterback starting.
Yeah, but I'm saying they're 10-1 and the Vikings are 9-1, and the Vikings were a materially better team last year.
Right.
And they don't have, and the Eagles and the Cowboys are in their division, public teams that we all expect to be good. So like that the 9-1 versus 10-1, like I think if that was plus 700, that would make a little bit more sense to me. Plus 650, 9-1 just seems too long to me.
I think Justin Jefferson's the ultimate cheat code. I mean, there's no denying what that man can do, but I just don't know what else the Vikings have. And this is what I thought last year when they had Kirk Cousins as the quarterback, who is a solid NFL average quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Now you're going down to Sam Darnold. And, I'm looking at, I'm a Michigan guy, so I love JJ McCarthy, but he's going to get killed as a starter, at least in the first set. He's going to get murdered. Yeah. And I see FanDuel has his passing yards prop at 2,600, 550 and a half yards.
Wow.
That means he's going to play.
Isn't that just building in that he's not going to start, though?
I don't think he's going to start the season, but 2,600 yards means like they expect him to play a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ready to play. I think he's got a ton of potential. I definitely understand the drafting of him. So, how much does Aaron Jones have left in the tank, as their primary option at running back?
When he's healthy, he's still really good. I don't know why you would have any faith that he's going to be healthy. That's the problem. And that's been the problem the last couple of years. So like, I would like to believe that in an offense where last year, it felt like they threw the ball 80% of the time. They didn't, but it felt like they did. And honestly, anytime they ran the ball, you went, why are you doing that? Because the run game was so bad. I think that's kind of the perfect situation for Aaron Jones, like 10 to 12 carries a game. That's the sweet spot for him anyway. So like, I think that works, but I think he can be really good in those situations because they're going to see too high exclusively, even with a rookie quarterback. And I think this is why a rookie quarterback is potentially set up to succeed in Minnesota, is because Justin Jefferson just demands so much respect that defenses are going to have a hard time game planning for this team, because it's like, okay, they don't want to run the ball, and we want to make JJ McCarthy beat us. But if we play single high, Justin Jefferson just might beat us by himself.
Right.
And so like that's the complicating factor. Now, if you watch the Raiders last year, they didn't take advantage of that. Like Devontae Adams draws a lot of attention. Because their quarterback play was so bad, they were not able to consistently take advantage of that. And maybe that happens in Minnesota, but I also think Kevin O'Connell is a much better coach than what the Raiders had last year.
Yeah, we'll see. I feel like Minnesota could be bad.
I think they're a variance team too. Like there's a world where they win 5 games because the quarterback just stinks, and the defense doesn't have enough players, because the defense doesn't have enough players, by the way.
They don't.
And so it's like, okay, but I also can see the case where Brian Flores, for half the season again, he's just like doing crazy stuff and zero blitzing the crap out of teams. And all of a sudden, like, they're 4-2 and you're going, hey, what happened? But again, they could also be 2-4, and that would be just the same in terms of like my surprise level.
Peter Bukowski, thank you so much for joining me on the Football Analytics Show. Please let everyone know where they can find all your good work.
Locked On Packers, wherever you get podcasts, YouTube. And if you're not a Packers fan, I get it. Locked On Sports Today is our all sports show. It's like the first 15 minutes of SportsCenter. Get the biggest stories every day, under 20 minutes. It's just an easy way. Start your day, get up to date on everything you missed the night before, and get on with your day. It's great.
Awesome. I'm going to check that out. You're the co-host of that?
I am the host of that.
So is it a solo show?
It is a solo show, and I have guys on, guys and gals from around the Locked On Podcast Network. So like last night, we had Nick Angstad from Locked On Mavericks talking about the Mavs, and then we had John Corrales from Locked On Celtics talking about the Celtics, and then Andy Kamenetsky from Locked On Lakers. They were talking about Jerry West, and so we pulled a clip of that. So we get to leverage having this great network of the best local hosts from around the country on and give the best breakdowns of these stories as they're happening.
I'm sure you bugged them about Dan Hurley, right? I mean, there's nothing.
A couple days before that, we had basically a Dan Hurley show. We had Andy come on and talk about the Lakers' perspective, and is this even a good job in LA? Who wants to take on that responsibility? And we had our Locked On UConn host talk about Hurley going back to UConn and chasing all-time goated greatness there. I mean, that's a pretty cool story. And that's sort of where Locked On Sports Today really shines.
Dan Hurley is amazing. I before his run last year in 2023, I dug into The Miracle of St. Anthony, which is about his dad.
Yeah.
And the book is phenomenal. I think it's my favorite sports book ever.
Wow.
But it really talks about just what a great teacher his dad was. I think Dan's clearly picked that up. His dad was also psychotic. Like literally challenging players to fights in the middle of practice. It's a fascinating read. But I think you're going to see a lot of very interesting things there. But anyways, so Locked On Sports Today, you get what, 20 minutes a day? Just
20 minutes a day. And we're on YouTube if you like YouTube. And then wherever you get podcasts otherwise.
And then you're going to do that all throughout the year?
Monday through Friday, all off season.
And you're doing a daily one on Packers too.
Packers daily, all off season, all in season, all the time. That's what we do on the Locked On Podcast Network. The tagline is your team every day, Ed. We can't do it. We can't be your team every day for only your team some of the days.
I have two very intense Packers fans as friends, and they both listen to you. So if you're Packers fans, you got to listen to Peter. And then, you don't stop there. You have the Substack with The Leap.
Oh, yeah. Probably should have mentioned that. The Leap, a newsletter I would love for everyone to subscribe to. That is 3 days a week in the off season, 5 days a week during the season. Me and Jason Hirschhorn. I can confidently say the analysis that is in there, you're just not going to get anywhere else. There's a lot of duplicative coverage on a lot of teams. It's not just a Packers thing. And that is not what The Leap is. We are constantly trying to find a way to bring you something that you didn't know, that you haven't heard, that you didn't think of. It's not going to just be the same story on, what happened in minicamp that day.
Awesome. Peter Bukowski, thanks again. You've been listening to the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host. Please check out my free email sports betting newsletter. If you're looking for any action, definitely what you want every Saturday morning. Check that out at thepowerrank.com. Thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again soon.